Condemnation following grave allegations against the Indian government.
What we want to see happen is obviously those involved in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, they need to be brought to justice.
How people here in the GTA are feeling after intelligence accuses a foreign state of being behind the killing of a Canadian Sikh leader on Canadian soil.
Today is the day that if you want a deal on both sides, you are cramming in a lot of work.
Plus, employees with the automaker Ford focused on a midnight strike deadline. Will bring you the latest from the bargaining table as American workers mark day 4 of job action.
It's everything that I was hoping for. I would have been happy with any team, but this is the team that I was hoping to get picked by.
And meet Toronto's first draft pick in the newly minted Women's Hockey League. We'll show you the famous faces on hand for this moment in hockey history. Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. We're beginning tonight with Canada's stunning allegation against a foreign country. The Prime Minister stood in the House of Commons today and accused the Indian government of being behind the killing of a Sikh leader in British Columbia. The grave allegation is sending shockwaves around the world, and those are certainly being felt here in the GTA, home to a large Sikh community. Anam Khan joins us live tonight. Anam, the story broke this afternoon, but still developing this evening. Just moments ago, the Indian government releasing a statement. What is it saying tonight?
So the Indian government completely rejects these allegations. They say allegations like this remove focus from Khalistani terrorists and extremists, which threaten India's sovereignty. And a lot of the people I spoke to today, they were really shocked to hear this, especially to hear the Canadian make these allegations, especially because Trudeau just came from India and there were a lot of tensions on that trip. But people I spoke to locally today, they felt a sense of relief. They felt like their concerns were validated.
This is one of the largest and oldest Sikh temples in Canada, where hundreds of people pray quietly. Today, they're speaking out loudly against violence toward their community.
We condemn all the killing happen right throughout, like the way the governments get involved in there, right? We condemn all kind of violence because Sikh people's always like a peaceful people, right? And then we spread our information, right, through the peacefully, not a violence.
Amrit Singh is a proud supporter of Khalistan, a separatist movement that seeks to create an independent sovereign state for Sikhs in India. He says his community was relieved to hear Canadian leaders are now pushing ahead with allegations in the death of a Khalistani leader. In June, Canadian citizen Hardeep Singh Nijjar was brazenly shot dead outside a Sikh temple in Surrey, BC. The outrage rang out across Canada, including here in Toronto, where many took to the streets in July, calling for justice.
Any involvement of a foreign government in the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil is an unacceptable violation of our sovereignty.
Today in Parliament, Justin Trudeau accused the Indian government of playing a role in Nijjar's killing. He said agents of the Indian government carried it out, an act he strongly condemned.
It is contrary to the fundamental rules by which free, open, and democratic societies conduct themselves.
Those harsh words being applauded by Sikhs in the GTA. But many are calling on the Canadian government to take substantive action too, especially since several leaders of the Khalistani movement live in Canada.
So what we want to see happen is obviously those involved in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, they need to be brought to justice. But there are a number of other Canadian Sikhs that are on so-called hit lists that are currently fearing for their lives, and we need to make sure that they are protected.
And the Canadian government did take some immediate action.
And as of today, and as a consequence, we've expelled a top Indian diplomat from Canada.
Experts say the action was shocking and will put India-Canada relations at an all-time low.
It is definitely meant to send a signal that, we do really strongly believe that this, not only did India do this, but we believe it to be just simply unacceptable.
So tomorrow there will be a press conference with the World Sikh Organization at the House of Commons, and there will be the National Council of Canadian Muslims along with them. Next Monday, there will be rallies held in front of Indian consulates across the country, and of course right here in Toronto as well.
All right, Anam Khan reporting live for us tonight. Thank you, Anam. An update out of the East End tonight. Subway and bus service is back up and running after a teenaged boy suffered serious injuries in a shooting at Kennedy Station this afternoon. Now, police were called to the station for reports of a shooting just after 3. Bus and train services were temporarily halted for that investigation. Officers say a teen was found with gunshot wounds in a residential neighborhood nearby. Police say he went home and called 911, where paramedics came to care for him. His injuries are described as non-life-threatening. Police have made no arrests at this time and haven't released any suspect information yet either. And in Whitby, a 14-year-old girl has been arrested after a stabbing inside a high school that left another 14-year-old girl with serious injuries.
The school was put into a lockdown as police continued to look for the suspects. The suspect was located shortly thereafter and taken into custody, at which time the lockdown was lifted.
So the stabbing happened shortly after noon at Father Leo J. Austin Catholic Secondary School. The victim suffered non-life-threatening injuries, and police have not said if the suspect has been charged. Back in Toronto, a glimmer of hope in the city's ongoing dire financial situation. The Premier and Toronto's Mayor holding a joint news conference for the first time today. They've agreed to a working group to try to hammer out a new financial arrangement for the City of Toronto. But as Lorenda Redekop explains, any deal that is to be struck is still weeks away.
Mayor Olivia Chow arrived at Queen's Park saying she was looking for a long-term financial deal to make life more affordable. More than an hour and a half later, she and the Premier faced reporters. Doug Ford started trying to show unity, presenting her with a framed photo of her with his late brother, former Mayor Rob Ford, when they unveiled a statue of her late husband, Jack Layton.
You always try to make me cry.
I know.
Thank you so much.
You don't always have to agree on things.
The two then announced the New Deal Working Group. Members of the public service from the province and the city will work together to come up with an agreement by the end of November. The province's release says it must avoid new taxes and fees. It seems the city's request for a Toronto tax won't go ahead.
I'm just not in favor, and especially in these times that people are struggling to put more of a burden on the backs of the taxpayers.
The tight deadline means the deal will be in time for the next city budget cycle.
We, the City of Toronto, really doesn't completely care where the money comes from as long as there's structurally a promise.
Mayor Chow suggested uploading costs to the province, saying the city pays a bigger chunk of a range of services now, including highways, transit, and childcare. So could 1% of the existing HST go to Toronto? Another suggestion that's been raised?
Not right now. What we want to do is work with them.
The Premier later seemed to contradict that answer.
I didn't say the existing tax. I just don't believe we should be raising taxes in the situation that the people are feeling the pressure.
In any case, it's a shift in tone by the Premier, acknowledging the difficulty for Toronto finances.
Well, first of all, let's give the mayor a fair shot here.
They also came together agreeing they'd like the federal government to join them. But one challenge to their partnership could be Ontario Place. The Premier didn't answer a question about that. The Mayor confirmed it came up in their discussion, but didn't go into detail. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Hopping outside for a live look at the city, and it is 13 degrees, and there's a little bit of cloud out there tonight. Let's get Colette into the conversation now. And Colette, a calmer evening after quite the unsettled day here.
Yeah, we got into some active weather here through the afternoon and early evening hours. A lot of that has improved. But all in all, some pretty nice conditions through the weekend and what we've had lately and what's to come. Our temperature's certainly not bad. 20 degrees this afternoon, 19 in Windsor, a little cooler into northern Ontario. But perhaps you notice towards the prairies, yes. Just some incredible heat yesterday with readings in the low 30s. And even today, some of those temperatures running 7 to about 14, 15 degrees above seasonal. We're much closer to where we should be at this time of year, finding that not only with our daytime highs, but our overnight lows as well. We'll get to those in just a second. Some of that activity from earlier continuing to move eastward. As it does, we get into some really nice conditions as we go into the day on Tuesday. Quite a lot of good weather coming this week. Overnight tonight, 11 degrees for that low. The winds likely no stronger than about 20 kilometers an hour tomorrow, and a high of 22. That long-range forecast coming up, Chris.
Looking forward to seeing more about that long-range forecast. Thank you, Colette. With less than an hour to go to a strike deadline, the president of the union representing thousands of Canadian workers at Ford Motor Company says no deal has been reached and there's a strong possibility of a strike.
If there is a strike, this will be a total strike. Every single one of Unifor's 5,600 members at Ford in Canada will be on picket lines. Our Oakville assembly plant, our Windsor powertrain operations, our parts distribution centers, our office and technical units. Everyone together.
The current contract expires in minutes at 11:59 p.m. Unifor says it's focused on increasing wages, improving pensions, and securing good jobs in a future set to be dominated by electric vehicles. The union hopes any agreement reached with Ford can be used as a blueprint for workers at General Motors and Stellantis. If a strike is called, Canadian Ford employees would join 13,000 auto workers who went on strike in the States last week, and that job action is now into day 4 after the United Auto Workers Union did not reach a deal with the 3 biggest American car makers. Now to a court challenge that's catching a lot of attention today. Ontario's Superior Court dismissed a case brought forward by sex workers. They say a law that was passed in 2014 violates their charter rights. As Dale Manukduk shows us, despite today's decision, their fight is not over.
Sex workers across the country are not asking for sex work to be recognized as a constitutional right.
Jen Clayman is taking issue with one of the lines in Justice Robert Goldstein's 148-page decision. It reads, first, there is no constitutional right to engage in sex work.
The rights that sex workers are asking to be respected are the right to bodily autonomy, to safety, to security, and above all, to equality.
Clayman is with the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform, which brought the charter challenge before the court. It looks at 2 sections of the Harper government's Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act, criminalizing sex workers communicating in public to sell sex and clients for obtaining or communicating to try and obtain sexual services. Today, the court upheld the PCEPA. While advocates say criminalizing sex workers makes them more vulnerable and separates them from seeking police, Justice Goldstein writes, sex workers should also understand that when PCEPA is properly interpreted, they can't seek police assistance without fear that they will be charged for selling their sexual services. Monica Forrester is a sex worker and one of the 5 individual applicants.
In my own personal experiences, when we address violence in our work, first, we're never believed. It's never followed up. And predators or people that inflict violence against sex workers are never brought to justice.
The PCEPA is similar to the Nordic model used in Norway, Iceland, France, and Israel, among other countries. The main objective is to reduce the demand for sexual services in order to protect women and girls who are disproportionately negatively impacted by the sex trade. Robert Valley supports the law and presented affidavits in court on behalf of sex workers.
I'll give you an example. One of them, while working in a strip club, the owner got sick and tired of her performance or whatever it is. And, backstage, using an X-Acto knife, he cut off her nipples. I do not have to make any of this stuff up. That's in the affidavit.
While today's court decision did not go in the Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform's favor,
this fight is not over. We likely will appeal this decision. And we sex workers have been fighting for rights for over 50, 60 years in this country alone and are an extremely resilient.
Dale Manukduk.
Welcome back. A costly rescue mission continues in Toronto's West End. A boring machine has been trapped beneath the street for well over a year. And the cost just keeps going up. And the frustration for neighbors, that has as well. City Hall reporter Sean Jeffords has been all over this expensive recovery mission right from the beginning and digs in again tonight.
The sound of heavy equipment is a familiar noise in this West Toronto neighborhood. Contractors have been working for over a year to recover a tunnel boring machine trapped underground. Neighbors have been dealing with a steady stream of construction vehicles, vibrations from the work, and dust. And now resident Tanya Boswick says they've received more bad news. Work has been delayed.
So everyone in the neighborhood's just feeling increasingly frustrated. It feels as though this project is just never going to end.
Work started in March of 2022 to create a new sewer with the boring machine. And just 7 meters shy of its destination, it became trapped underground. Work to rescue it was to have been completed this fall. Now it won't happen until December, with some restoration work set for the spring. City of Toronto Engineering Department Director Mika Risanen understands the community's frustration.
They can be assured that we are moving things forward as quickly as we can, also being as safe as we can for the workers and the public and the infrastructure.
Grout, which had been used to stabilize the ground nearby, seeped into the tunnel near the machine. Removing it caused the delay.
This is just the latest bit of bad news that neighbors have received about this project. Just a few months ago, the city informed residents that the costs to rescue the boring machine have tripled. They've jumped from $9 million earlier this year to around $25 million.
Angela Lamb lives in one of the condo buildings overlooking the construction site. Residents there are trying to make the best of a difficult situation, she says.
It's a rescue operation, and our building calls her Betsy. They're trying to rescue Betsy, and it doesn't look easy.
Resident John Guglielmo lives down the street from the main site, but a pit where the machine was placed underground remains open near his home years after the work started. He's pushing the city to take a deep dive into the situation to ensure it can learn from mistakes on the project.
I think we deserve the answers for the money we pay in taxpayer dollars to have this come to fruition, finish, and do it cleanly and concisely.
City staff say the latest timeline is based on the best available information, but they're also not ruling out further delays if more unexpected problems arise. Sean Jefford, CBC News, Toronto.
Today was an historic day for women's hockey. The inaugural draft was held for the new Professional Women's Hockey League. It's set to start its first season in January, but the draft was held today right here at CBC Toronto headquarters. And some heavy hitters in the world of sports were on hand to mark the moment. Greg Ross has that story.
This is an incredible moment.
Tennis legend and advocate for women's sports Billie Jean King had the honor of announcing the first overall pick in the PWHL draft.
With the first overall pick in the inaugural Professional Women's Hockey League draft, Minnesota selects Taylor Heisey.
American-born Taylor Heisey is selected by her hometown team. She says the last few days have been a whirlwind, but she's doing her best to savor the moment.
I try to take in every moment. I wrote down what I did, the days I did it, just to make sure that I remember this for the rest of my life. It's obviously an inaugural thing. It's a history.
Toronto picked second, and they took a familiar face in Canadian women's hockey, Jocelyn Larocque, who has been playing hockey in the GTA for the past decade.
It's everything that I was hoping for. I would have been happy with any team, but this is the team that I was hoping to get picked by.
Hi, how are you?
The Professional Women's Hockey League is made up of 6 teams. In addition to Toronto and Minnesota, there are franchises in Montreal, Ottawa, New York, and Boston.
It's a day that's going to inspire so many more people to get involved, so many young girls.
Former women's hockey player Jana Hefford is the Senior Vice President of Hockey Operations for the PWHL. She's been a part of other attempts to create professional women's hockey leagues, like the now defunct Canadian Women's Hockey League.
This is different because we have an ownership group that comes with the capital, the resources, the experience to run a professional league. We have the best players in the world. We've never seen more demand for women's sport around the world.
Canadian hockey star Sarah Nurse signed as a free agent with the Toronto franchise. She says having an official draft is also new to women's hockey.
Previously, how women's hockey would work was you basically played where you lived. You played where you worked, you played where it was convenient for you.
The puck will drop on the first PWHL games in January. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, back to you, Colette. And midway through September, not a bad forecast by any means, just not the best in the country, hey?
Yeah, I know, right, Chris? You think we're doing okay, and then you notice our neighbors a little bit to the west of us with temperatures in the high 20s, low 30s. It's like, wait a minute. Well, all in all, we've just had such great weather. So it's really hard to complain. Yes, some wet conditions today and pockets of some downpours, even a bit of hail reported on the west end of Lake Ontario, and also seeing a bit of that active weather through cottage country too. So when we look at a normal high for this time of year, it's 20, and that's where we were today. This morning, we were actually between 12 and 13, so a little milder than normal. And look where we could be. This is what's possible, but this is also possible to see temperatures as low as freezing at this time of year. And certainly back there, just before 1950, some very serious rainfall amounts too coming through the area. So much lighter stuff that we experienced, that's moved off to the east. We're getting this clearing trend, a really good setup for Tuesday. I do want to just point out towards southwestern Ontario, a feature of a little bit more variable at times with some of that cloud cover. But then watch this next system that tries to roll through on Wednesday. I think much of it is going to stay kind of south, a glancing shower there into the Windsor area, maybe even Sarnia, Leamington. Certainly it's possible, but there shouldn't be much to it. And elsewhere in southern and eastern Ontario, we'll be looking at a lot of bright sunshine. Overnight temperatures tonight, do you see some single digits on the board? Yes, you do. And then we get kind of some cooler air starting to push through on Tuesday night. So I think we'll see more widespread single digits coming up, including right here in Toronto, where we're going to have that low of 9. But that's after a daytime high tomorrow of 22 degrees. Wednesday, 20. This is the last week of summer. Fall officially starts on Saturday, and I think summer's letting us know that it's still an active season and things pretty good. And then we'll slide into fall this weekend.
Yeah, no kidding. Would have been nice to have this weather in August. All right, thanks, Colette. We're ending the show tonight under the Gardiner and an effort to spruce up the arts and culture hub under the Expressway with an experimental garden.
When we got here, it was December, and it was really cold, and it had rained the night before. And I think what we saw was this grand urban bloom. There was large puddles, there was kind of accidental plants jumping up from the ground, and we sort of thought, why not start to think about this place actually as a garden?
Accidental plants, I like that. The Bentway Staging Grounds blends art and entertainment and is meant to encourage urban ecology. The garden gets its food source from rainwater runoff from the highway, and the planters naturally filter out toxins from that water. The project has been in the works for over a year. Very neat. And that is our show for you tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Good night. We'll see you tomorrow.